how are we as an audience expected to believe that this person would get to the point where she had basically created a situation where she had no options? Hi everyone! I'm so excited to be back. It has been such a long time. Oh my gosh. I tried to film a video last week, but my apartment setup has changed so much since I last was filming. I was looking for a good spot. I was trying to figure out noise cancellation. Anyway, you are not here for that. You are here for the books. So I thought that a great way to come back would be a June wrap-up video. I just realized that I was going to use my phone to talk about the books because I can't remember all of them, but I'm also using my phone to film. Okay, I am gonna go get Goodreads up on my computer. We will skip ahead to that. Please stand by. All right, y'all, we are back. So I have my list up ready to go, so let's get started. The first book I read this month was Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. So I actually was trying to read this in May for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It was on my list, but I didn't get to it until June. But it was the first book that I read in June, and I loved it. I have been wanting to read this book for a while. It's basically a collection of essays that have been edited by Alice Wong, who is very prominent in the disability advocacy community. And the essays talk about various aspects of disability, all the way from very debilitating physical disabilities to mental illness. It really runs the gambit and it shares a variety of different experiences. And what I really loved about it is that it's written by disabled people for a disabled audience. It was very similar to Detransition Baby by Tori Peters in that it's a book written by a person from a community for people in that community, which I really appreciate because I don't want to feel like someone is like trying to filter their experiences through what's socially acceptable or what's understood by the majority. I want to read about their experiences as they're experiencing them. I will say there are various trigger warnings throughout the essays. If I remember correctly, there are trigger warnings at the beginning of each essay, so it should be pretty easy to go through and see like, oh, this is a topic that I would like to avoid, so I can go ahead and skip over this essay. The essays are also organized thematically. I think there's one called like being and becoming, and so you can sort of read about those different thematic experiences. It also is a very diverse collection, so in addition to the authors being disabled, they're also people of color, women, members of the LGBTQ community, and intersections of all of those aforementioned identities. So it's very much a collection that tries to share the diverse nature of disability and show the day-to-day life, what it's like to live with that disability. And there are also essays in there, I feel like I'm talking so much about this, but it was really good. There were also essays in there written by activists talking about their activism, which was also really engaging and compelling. I actually learned that a philosopher that I had read in college, his name is now escaping me, but this particular philosopher, I actually had not learned about this side of him, and so I really respected him based on what I had learned in college. And then I learned that he toes the line of eugenics in terms of how he thinks that we should handle disabled people. And so I was really glad that that was the first essay jumping right in, is talking about like this person that I had heard about that was really prominent in this contemporary philosophy, talking about this issue of, it's not even assisted suicide at that point because it's basically doing it without the consent of the person. And so that is a really definitely really important for people like me who are able-bodied, who are not aware of this discourse that is going on, to learn about that so that now I can be aware of it and I can identify when I see it, you know, in the wild and try to address it. Anyway, that was a very long-winded explanation of this book, but it was honestly really powerful and really impactful. As an able-bodied person, there are so many things that I don't think about, the privilege that I have moving through the world without a disability. So go read it. Go read it. The next book that I read was Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this book is actually not out yet. I got an advanced reader's copy, and I got it because my librarian friend had reviewed it on Goodreads, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did you get an advanced reader's copy? And she was like, if you have your American Library Association like membership attached to your NetGalley, they'll just approve you. And I was like, really? Because like Taylor Jenkins Reid is this huge famous author who has this huge following, and I was like, are they really gonna just approve little old me for an arc? But they did, and so I got to read it. I read it in like 2 days. It was incredible. If you've read Malibu Rising, it follows a character that appears in Malibu Rising, Carrie Soto. I don't want to spoil Malibu Rising, but she plays quite a role in Malibu Rising, so I wasn't sure what to expect. But I mean, to put it succinctly, Carrie Soto is Back is what Taylor Jenkins Reid does best. It's complicated, nuanced female protagonists. It's great character study, but with a fast-paced plot. It's diving into a particular niche. In this case, it's tennis in the 80s. But even though that's not necessarily a topic that I'm super passionate about, I still found myself super engrossed, on the edge of my seat. And I think that that's just a credit to Taylor Jenkins Reid, the fact that she's able to get you to feel as passionate about the topic as the protagonist does. Go pre-order it. It is such a good book. I am definitely going to pre-order it so that I can give it to people in my family because they actually do like tennis, and I feel like they would really enjoy this book. The next book I read was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Oh my gosh, y'all. The journey I went through to try to get my hands on this book. I have really tried not to buy books lately, so I requested for my library to purchase it. They said no. I requested it through interlibrary loan. That request was denied. I tried to do a program that my state does where I can like get reciprocity with other libraries. So I went through all the paperwork to do that, and then by the time I got it with the library that had a copy, the copy had been checked out and they only had one copy. And I was just like, I was exhausted. I was about to buy an ebook copy. I really didn't want to. And then it turned out one of my friends had bought the book already and she had just finished it. And so I borrowed it from her and I read this one in 2 days as well. It was super cute. What the book is about now that we're done with my journey of trying to acquire this book. So the book is about this character named Viv, and she has been part of an adventuring party, and she's decided that she's done with the adventuring life and she wants to settle down and open a coffee shop, which is something that is foreign to the people who live in the town where she's starting this coffee shop. Like, it's very much this like new concept that's only been started in this one town that she visited that's really far away. And so she's just like trying to like introduce everyone to the concept of coffee, which is kind of hilarious, like as everyone is like what is this bean water? It's great. Anyway, so it's basically like a story of found family and overcoming obstacles and starting a second chapter, you know? Like, she's lived this like life where she's done a specific thing and she's just ready to move on to the next thing. I really appreciated all of that. I thought it was very cute. Definitely scratched that like Dungeons and Dragons itch, but also like it has like some queer romance. It's just all around great. And the found family bit was so profound, seems really intense, but like I never cry when I read books, and I cried at the end of this book. It was really, really sweet. The next book that I read it's called Life of Melody, and it's by Mari Costa. And I believe it's either a juvenile or a young adult graphic novel, which I've been getting into a lot lately because one of my coworkers has recommended a lot of them to me, and they've been really cute and good. And this one was no different. It's actually one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. It is enemies to lovers, which I really appreciate. That's one of my favorite tropes. You got some queer romance, and it's got like some fantasy elements to it. But ultimately, it's sort of just like a slice of life story about these two creatures from different lived experiences and realms coming together to raise this child. And it's just really cute. And I thought the illustrations were especially good. Especially love the use of color. I honestly think it's one of, if not the most beautiful graphic novel I've read this year. So yeah, I would highly recommend that one as well. Unfortunately, we are now getting into the books I read this month that I did not really vibe with as much. The next book that I read is called Coming Back by Jessie Zabarski. It is also a juvenile graphic novel. So I was going into it expecting it to be really cool. It had all of the makings of like found family, breaking from tradition, making your own way. And it did have those elements, but for some reason, I found the plot very difficult to follow, which was confusing to me because it was a graphic novel, so the images should have helped enhance the story, but I just couldn't really understand what was going on. I understood that there was some tradition that had been broken that led these two people to be torn apart, but I had no idea like what was the tradition? Why was it established? Like what are these two people doing? Where are these two people going? Like, it was very unclear. I gave it 3.5 stars because, I mean, the images were gorgeous. Like, I thought the art was amazing, but I was just like, I cannot follow what's going on at all. I personally wouldn't recommend this, but if you are able to sort of understand what's going on, maybe it could be a better experience for you. All right, the next book that I read was The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This is the second Grady Hendrix books that I read. The first one was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I loved. I believe I talked about that in a previous video. So I was excited to give him a second shot with the Final Girl Support Group. The issues I had with the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires were more pronounced in the Final Girl Support Group. The premise of the Final Girl Support Group is that the end of a horror movie, you have the final girl who has somehow made it through all of the things that have happened in the movie. Basically, there is a support group of women who did that in real life. Like they made it through some horrible situation and they were the last one standing. And so I was intrigued by that. I was like, oh, this will be cool, sort of see where this is going. And I feel like Hendrix tried to sort of subvert the tropes that are associated with this genre, but I feel like the aspects of like female friendship that made Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires so good just weren't there. Like the plot was very fast paced, like it read really well. I mean, it was an enjoyable read, but I felt like it didn't really bring anything new to the genre, you know, which I know is a lot to like ask for from a book, but especially after reading Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I felt like did do that really successfully, I was sort of like, I mean, this was good. I mean, I think I gave it 4 stars. Like it wasn't bad by any means. I just think it didn't stay with me the way that the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires did. And so I definitely would recommend this book with the caveat that there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of violence against women, there's a lot of sexism. So be aware of those things going into the book. I guess my other caveat to recommending it would be there are better horror stories out there written about women, written by women. Next book is We Had to Remove This Post, and it's by Hannah Bervoets. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce her last name because I believe she is, I'm not sure if she's Danish, but this book was not originally written in English. It's a translation. The premise is that there's this woman whose name I've already forgotten because this book just did not stick with me, who is working as a content moderator for this company called Hexa, which basically is this third-party company that companies like Facebook will contract to moderate their content. And the point of the book is supposed to be this is what happens when you take normal people and you have them moderate this like horribly violent, horribly racist, horribly just bigoted content in every way. This is what happens when they have done that for a long time. I had a number of issues with this. The first is I am definitely someone who is always like, this book needs to be shorter. Like, if you can say something in fewer words, say it in fewer words. Like, I don't want to sit here and read through a dense book that could have been condensed. All that being said, I feel like this book, it could have benefited from being a little bit longer because I think that what would have made this book more successful is if we had sat with the characters and had the sort of progression of sort of like how this content is impacting them if we had had that happen over a longer period of time. And we had sort of sat with them on this day-to-day basis of like, this is what it was like when they first started. This is sort of how things started to get a little bit questionable, and then here's how we end up at the end where things have happened, the content has impacted them in ways that are very intense and are supposed to prompt questions about the job of content moderation. I do have some things I want to say about it that are spoilery. So I'm going to go ahead and say spoiler warning, spoiler warning. I personally thought that the way that the content impacted them, one, was not sort of justified. I'll give an example so it's clear. So we saw a gay character and we had also a Jewish character. And so these characters went through the process of content moderation. And on the other side, they ended up basically becoming neo-Nazis. And the only sort of explanation we got for how they got to this point was that they sort of became enamored with flat earth theory. And then that is what took them over into like white supremacy, like, you know, alt-right conspiracy theory territory. So, all of this to say, I personally did not think that this book succeeded at what it was trying to do. I thought it was too short, and I think that it should have been more based in what we know about how the internet radicalizes people. So, ooh, yes. So the next book I read was Cover Story by Susan Rigetti. Okay, so the premise of this book is, to be completely honest, it's essentially Anna Delvey's life is the premise of this book. But it's supposed to be a fictionalized story about a con artist who comes into the fashion world and takes advantage of this young, naive intern. And it reads a lot like the relationship that Anna Delvey had with Rachel Deloche Williams. I read it in a few days. I thought it was very compelling in that it hit a lot of the notes of like what we as a society love about true crime. I don't think it was particularly creative. I don't think it really added anything to the conversation. I also had a couple of issues with it beyond that it just, you know, it was essentially a fictionalized version of a story that exists and involves real people who are still alive. So my first issue was the protagonist is supposed to be from like a middle class background, maybe working class, but she has no sense of self-preservation. Like, for instance, she is leasing an apartment and she gets to the point where she has 2 days left before she has to renew her lease, and she has no money to either move or renew the lease. And I'm just like, how are we as an audience expected to believe that this person would get to the point where she had basically created a situation where she had no options, all because she was just enamored with this con artist figure? And so that was just one of many examples where the main character has no sense of self-preservation, and it really just like took me out of the story and made it difficult to suspend disbelief. My other issue is that I thought the ending was not only unbelievable, but not backed up by what had previously been written. It seemed like it was put in there to give sort of like a this twist ending, who could have seen it coming, but it contradicted a lot of what we had previously learned about the characters. Anyway, I would love to talk about the ending with someone who has read this book because I truly do not understand it. I tried to Google people who had explained the ending, and they also thought that it basically just was a huge plot hole, but it was a read. I got through it pretty quickly. Like, the pacing was great. The writing was okay, but yeah, ultimately it wasn't anything that's really gonna stick with me long term. Now here to redeem those previous not so great reads is Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. This hits a lot of the things that I love about a story. It's the story of a city, Memphis, and it's told from different perspectives of women in this family, the North family. It is very similar to Homegoing, it escaped me for a moment, by Jesse, and that it's sort of this intergenerational, this story told through the lens of women from different generations. And as you move through the book, you learn new things about an aspect of their history that had previously been told. So it's just the layers are unfolding as you go from perspective to perspective. There's discussions of intergenerational trauma. There's discussions of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a Black woman, discussions of how the city of Memphis has sort of evolved through these generations. And I thought it was incredibly well done. I thought the writing was great. You really get this clear sense of place, and you can see how the author just really has this love for the city. My one issue was that the pacing was a little off, which is can be difficult when you have these different perspectives that you're jumping to, especially if you're jumping from, I think that at one point there was a jump from like 2003 all the way to like 1968. So it's just very jarring to be like taken out of one aspect of the story and placed into a different one. But overall, I thought it was really well done. So I ultimately gave it 4.5 stars, and I would highly recommend that you read it. So, all that being said, those are the books that I read in June. It is great to be back. I'm gonna aim to upload perhaps once a week. That might be a little bit, we'll see. We'll see if that happens. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful end of June and beginning of July. I will see you in the next one. Bye.